it's Pastor Dan from Dexter Gospel Church with the Proverbs Practical. Thanks for watching this video. Today's proverb looks at the choice between giving and keeping. We're in Proverbs 11:24. It says, "There is that scatters and yet increases, and there is that withholds more than is meet, but it tends to poverty." So here's a curious principle. Generosity tends toward abundance, not poverty. There are those who always seem to be giving, but they never run out. They're like the widow's pot of oil. God keeps filling them as they fill others. Giving is even labeled a spiritual gift in the list of gifts in Romans 12. Those whom God has gifted to give can and should do so with as much confidence as those whom God has gifted to teach or exhort. How do you know if you have that gift? Well, that's a big question for a different time, but the gist in Romans is that if you're doing it for God, you're doing it in His power, so you may be more gifted than you realize. I'm minded of a guy named Chuck Feeney who passed away just a few years ago. Feeney made more than $8 billion in his empire of duty-free purchase shops, which were available at airports. He then proceeded to give away more than $8 billion to charities around the globe, usually anonymously or with a specific request not to disclose the source of the donation. For himself, he kept $2 million. That's with an M, not a B. Feeney always flew economy, lived in a small apartment, and didn't own a car because he took public transit. For most of us, having $2 million would be a lot of money. There are people who would grasp and clinch and keep everything they could to become a millionaire. For Feeney, it was just a drop in the bucket. But perhaps that's because he was scattering instead of hoarding. Does that mean that it's always wrong to save? That we should just take a vow of poverty and everything we get we should immediately give away? Well, no. The second half of the statement says that we're not supposed to withhold more than is meet. That means more than is appropriate or suitable. And withholding what we should give is what tends to poverty. That means that there is an appropriate amount to keep, to save at times. It can be wise to save. It's foolish to save too much, though. I think this speaks both to not paying people what you owe them when you can, and not helping people whom you can and should. This may apply even more broadly than that. Money that is sat on rather than being used actively tends to decline in value. It's been observed that successful businesses tend to turn their inventory over very quickly. They don't waste shelf and storage space on things that aren't selling in hopes that they might sell later. They dump those things and move on. In essence, not withholding their money that's wrapped up in those things, but putting it into use. Seed that is kept in a storehouse doesn't produce a crop like seed that is scattered across a field. But whether the use is investment, selling, or giving, ironically, clinging to what you have when you should be using it actively will tend to reduce your wealth, not increase it. Now, this is another of those general patterns, not guarantees without exception. There are stingy misers who do have a lot of money, and there are generous paupers who have next to nothing despite their giving. But the general principle is that being generous doesn't end up hurting us financially. God, through His providence, tends to bring back to us what we give. As the old saying goes, you can't outgive God. I hope this video is a help to you. If so, give it a thumbs up, to give it a like. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more insights from the Scripture. Until next time, I hope you stay well and give generously.